So we do 40-hour weeks. Now, when somebody does work with us and they come in for a first day of work, after 8 hours, guess what? They're exhausted. They didn't spend any time reading their email. They went and got coffee once or twice because that's when they're a partner and they decided to go do it, right? They actually work 8 hours. It's exhausting. Try it someday. Well, I mean, so recommend it to some of your peers who don't do it. I'm sure all of you do. Right? Back here.
Yeah, you mentioned one advantage of doing Agile is allow client to change scope.
Yes.
And I want to ask if you do fixed price contract or time and material. When you change scope, do you charge them more? Or
So do we do fixed price versus time and materials? Almost all of our contracts now are time and materials.
okay.
To a fixed budget, because there's no more money. When we used to do fixed price deals, and we did a couple, and I used to do them prior to Menlo, the problem is most business participants no longer feel they have skin in the game. Oh, it's your problem. I gave you the spec, your problem. When they walk away like that, I can't solve anything at the weekly planning session. They need to have skin in the game. If they're worried about me having skin in the game, that's easy. I've solved that. I'll take half of what I was going to bill you and I'll put that on a royalty on the product. Product never ships, I'm in the hole. So I get skin in the game a different way than a fixed price contract, because a fixed price contract doesn't bring the parties together.
So you use Agile process for fixed price contract?
Yes. When we did fixed price contracts, we still did Agile, exactly the same way. The only difference is the project manager was responsible for the contract and they played the planning game, not the client. The client could still show up and request changes, but they didn't have the power anymore to move cards by themselves. They gave that up with a fixed price contract.
Can you talk a little bit about your process?
So the first interview, right, is we bring everybody in mass and you partner with 3 other people. Then we're going to force rank all of you as to who was the best player in, who showed the best teamwork skills. We'll do a second interview where we bring you back. Now, we recognize that some people do good resume, some people do good interview, some people do good work. And there is no correlation whatsoever that I can find between the 3. So we kind of ignore the first 2, and the second interview is you get a 1-day contract to work on a real project with a real team. Because the biggest problem, I think, for most organizations is the people they interview who don't interview well, who would be fabulous workers. And so they actually get to sit in our team and start working, and they shine. And then afterwards you can tell they're so introverted or they're uncomfortable and nervous. But man, you get them in front of the keyboard with a partner in a language they don't even know, and they get things done and they get excited and they engage. It's powerful. In our organization, then we do a third interview, which is a 3-week subcontracting agreement. We're basically saying, hey, we're bringing you on, but understand, you know, there's a point where you're going to be evaluated. Now the reality is you're evaluated like everybody else every single week because our clients can cut us off. Right? Our team always shrinks and grows, so we're always letting people go.
James, do you pay the interviewing for the 1-day contract?
Yes, otherwise it would not be a binding contract by US law. There are other ways to create compensation. Consideration is actually the term of art. But yes, they get paid $8 an hour, and we bill the client for it. So that the client knows when people are on their project, but the clients know about the process. This means, because they actually do work. So we interviewed, imagine this. Imagine you want to be a project manager. Might be a scary idea, but you come to our process, you interview, the second interview you show up and we're like, oh, good news, it's show and tell day, the client's coming. And this client is our biggest client, and they're bringing their CEO, and you're running the show and tell. Oh, and by the way, the current project manager will pair with you, but they're going to put you front and center, you're going to run it. Now this means the CEO is also going to give us feedback on you. Right? How's that for weird? Well, we get real data. I know how you perform, under real stress. This is my first day on the job, I have to tell you we didn't get the story done.
And I can't tell you why.
And I have no idea, right? Now, at the same time, the team's right there as part of the, and they feel that the team's going to support them, right? And it gives them a better feel of what does it work like, what's life like at Menlo, which is another important part of interviewing. How many times do you interview people and they really don't get a sense of what it's like to be in your culture? Do you think if somebody goes through our first 2 interviews, they have a good idea, some semblance of an idea of what life would be like in our organization? That's important. because that means they have the chance to self-select out if this isn't going to work. It's not going to make them happy.
What do you see in this transition? What has been your biggest failure, and what do you see as your biggest sort of shortcoming right now that you're working?
Well, literally, it would be the call I got at 1:45 saying, "Hey, Jay, town without actually doing this client proposal that was due today," and they showed up for it. But that might be my own personal failure. And it actually does point back, right? So there was a heroic failure there. So I've talked about how our developers do planning, but we've extended it to our designers and our QA and so forth. We don't do pre-sales proposals in our planning process. Right? We haven't built up sufficient organizational knowledge. I left the office and they're calling me about this. That's a failure. Right? Because the organization has to live without me as well, because someday I want to go walk through the Andes. Well, not actually want to just go golfing, but right? I don't want to be trapped. And so the biggest challenge is to make sure that I don't become the glue that holds it together, or that Rich doesn't become the glue that holds it together. So we have to continue to build that kind of same capability throughout the whole organization. Right? We don't think of Agile as a developer practice. And yes, we have failures along the way. Absolutely. It's not utopia. I assure you that my favorite part about going to a conference is everybody, "That's fabulous." I go, "Oh, cool. Yeah, sometimes I forget because it's really hard to work there." Right? A key concept that I want to make sure I do put out there. Agile solves nothing. If you don't understand that, you're in real trouble. Agile does not solve anything. It simply creates an opportunity for the culture of transparency to exist. And so only do Agile if you're interested in seeing the underbelly of all your problems, and there's somebody with the fortitude to actually deal with them. Because Agile doesn't solve them. It just makes them apparent. Which is really cool if you're trying to solve it. That's what your CEO is doing there, trying to push all those buttons about. I think I want to try and solve something. Right? And they have no idea. They spin the corporate steering wheel to the right and the car goes left. Oh, I get it, it goes the opposite. And they spin to the left and the car goes backwards. And they just keep throwing more switches. Right? Agile helps make it more transparent. It doesn't solve things.
So you talked a lot about how your company can contract and grow. And now that sounds good for you and your clients, but it doesn't necessarily sound very stable for your employees.
Nope. It is a challenge for the employees. Well, so it's a challenge for our contractors and employees. Now, one of the typical things people will ask me is, well, if this is working out so well for people, what's your turnover? Because turnover is a great measure of whether or not you're successful, right? Now, we've thought about this long and hard. What we actually think of is we're happy when somebody leaves our organization, and we're sad at the same time. But they go get a 50% raise somewhere else, because I'm not going to give them that. I have to give it to everybody. They all know everybody's salary, right? So if they go leave to go make 50% more because somebody's like, oh, we can hire away a Menlo person, that's a good thing. We celebrate it. And then we try and draw more people in. Right? So we're going to keep a feeder system. But imagine if you had an innovative company, right? Let's pick this table right here. Fabulous team. They've built up this great stuff. They're producing. Now, this team stays exactly the same for the next 20 years. How innovative are they going to be 20 years from now when they have exactly the same team dynamic that they have probably established in a year? Right? How is turnover a good measure of whether or not your team's performing? How do I measure it? The number of people who've left the organization who still come to the all-hands company meeting. The people who don't make it through the interview process, who go get a job somewhere else, and then immediately try to hire us. Right? I have to measure it through other ways because just people wanting to stay at the organization is not a good measure. Or at least that's our perspective today. And it's hard. It's hard to shrink. I'll bet GM, well, there's probably nobody at GM. But imagine if they hadn't paid people not to build cars for 20 years. They might still be in business. Right? I have no choice. When I don't have work, I got to let them go. Otherwise, I'm going to be unemployed, they're going to be unemployed, we're all in trouble. And we choose the people who rose their hand and said, hey, I'll sign on as a contractor.
So do you see, is your workforce then relatively young?
Yes, in a way. So we'll go back to our pair picture. Where's our pair picture? There we go. Yes, John would be flattered. As with David and Dan, and I mean, understand, there is a prejudice in our organization to be the second wage earner, or to be less concerned about things if you're a contractor. However, in today's economy where there are so many people who can't find a permanent position, who also get a taste of what it's like to work in this environment where they can put green stickies and work with people who are not exactly like them, right? We value diversity. We use international interns from IESTA to ensure that we have new blood every year who's diverse and that we have to learn how to communicate with somebody from a different culture, different language. Because we think it helps us solve problems. Right? So amazing the number of people walk through and go, oh, well, this works because everybody is in their 20s. And I just look at them and I look at my team and I go, huh? It's like, oh, well, I guess it's good living here. So we're not that way.
You say like 50-50 on employees versus contractors?
Probably closer 33 to 66, right? 1/3, 2/3.
Employees?
Yep.
Yeah. So
No. So
other way?
we're not at 99 yet. So we probably have 15 to 20 employees. I don't actually keep track because it's interesting. I don't actually really need to know. Operationally, they're treated the same. Their compensation and the mechanisms for sending them home and stuff are different.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is that a fairly static number as far as, does that contract as well, or are you mostly cutting back?
It does contract. It was probably one of the biggest failures. Okay, so there are many failures along the way. One of them was it took us a year to fire somebody who didn't fit anymore. He had been a good worker for 2 years. He was an employee. The third year, it was clearly, fire me, I dare you. Fire me, I dare you. And it took us a while to finally say, okay, we got to do this. Because if you have somebody who's not contributing, does the team know it? And if the management doesn't act on it, how does the rest of the team feel about what management's doing? Right? It was debilitating. So we should have acted faster. And everybody would have been happier. He went to another place and found some job that he really liked. Okay, we're now over. It's time for break. I'm happy to answer more questions, so you can chase me down in the hallway. Right?
Actually, what I told the other presenters is they have until 3:15. So.
Okay, so we can answer 8 more minutes of questions. I'm happy to do that before we go in the hallway. Let's see if we can get back in the back corner.
With two people paired up doing a set of tasks, is your productivity of two people, if they were doing them separately, or more than that, like 2.3 or 2.5?
So what's the productivity of doing pairs? You know, it's interesting. We have different answers throughout our organization. The long-term effectiveness, I think, is tremendously different. How many people have in their organization somebody who's really brilliant, who doesn't play nicely with others, and if they ever went away, you'd be in real trouble? Or you need more work than they can possibly do, but nobody else can do it because it'd be less efficient, even though you're missing deadlines, right? In our world, we ignore that and say, look, we're going to make everybody work on everything. It's less efficient. But if you're measuring efficiency as a corporate standard for what you're trying to produce, that's a lousy measurement. Effectiveness, right? It's sort of like, I believe the common statement of 8 to 10 people is a good size for an Agile team. We run teams as big as 30. Do we pay a cost for that? Yeah. But let's explain to the venture capitalists why we're not going to be ready for the trade show. Because we're trying to be efficient. Yeah, but you're not going to reach the goal. Right? How many people drove here today? Use the efficiency gear to get home. It's called N. Right? Put it in N and just kind of coast downhill. Steer more downhill, and eventually, maybe you'll make it home. This is what it feels like to the CEO. The IT team keeps saying, we're not being efficient. We need to do this because we're efficient. You want to be effective. Now, when you have multiple strategies for being effective, measure the efficiency of each or cost of each, and then make decisions based on that. But if you optimize first and foremost for efficiency, you will always trap yourself, right? This is the basic concept of lean. I'm going to sub-optimize each one of these pieces to make them perfectly efficient, and then wonder why the system doesn't perform at all. Right? So it's amazing when people come take tours. And anybody here, you are all invited, if you're ever in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to come by and visit us. Literally just come upstairs, find out where we are, give us a call, just walk in and say, I was at a conference and James said I could come take a tour. And a member of our team will give you a tour. Okay? When people come in and take the tour, and see this, they start to recognize maybe individual efficiency is not the best thing for their organization.
At the same time, there are researchers, Alistair Coburn, I believe, have some, and they do show that pair programming is more efficient.
So, like Alistair Coburn, and there were some early studies by, the pair programming book from North Carolina. I mean, let's be real. I spend my money on any internal project. We're rebuilding our website. The team pairs when they're doing this. I'm paying my money. Do you think if I thought that it wasn't valuable, I would pay 2 people to do the same job as one? The problem is if one person does it and it gets moved off to another project, I'll never get the project done. I need team-based knowledge. Team-based knowledge cannot be trapped in an individual. More questions? Oh, that showed up.
How many roles, different roles do you have on a project team?
Okay, so we have developers,
Yeah.
we have quality assurance, we have high-tech anthropologists, which is our designers, and we have project managers who are PMI certified or working on it. I happen to be a PMP. It's kind of fun. I give these presentations at PMI conferences. All this stuff is what PMI teaches. It's not what people interpret PMI to be. It's what Rational teaches in RUP. Again, it's not what people interpret or what they do. Iterations, right? Don't do all these practices. This is a work authorization board. And when I describe it using PMI language, they're stunned, right? But those are the key roles. We also have a factory floor manager whose job it is to make sure that there's extra people available or people on demand. We have an evangelist whose job it is to make sure that Rich and I and others go out and do public speaking because we don't actually have a sales force. So this is how people sort of learn about us. I'm actually training you all to be marketing experts in Menlo. So you're going to go tell all of your friends, I met the weirdest company today. And one of you will find somebody who maybe wants to do a project with us. Does that answer your question?
I think so. And also one other thing, you said you hire based on people being great team players, but then how do you decide their starting salaries? Is it still based on their technical skills and how senior they are?
So we do struggle with how we set starting salaries. We vacillated between 2 models. One where we try to evaluate where they are and one where everybody starts as an intern. But imagine if you start as an intern at Menlo after being in the industry for 20 years, you get to ask for feedback and a review as often as you want. There's no minimum amount of time you have to spend in a pay grade to move up again. Don't care, not interested. We also have one big push right now. We now have the movement within the team to start asking for demotions. Because there's a couple of team members who are not performing and they want to be moved down. Not the others want to move them down, the individuals who are not performing. Because they recognize this is a unique culture and they don't want the ills that they've seen in other organizations to start here because somebody once made it to this level and they're not performing there. So I'm getting heavy push to start lowering salaries on
Wait a sec,
individuals.
is ADP doing your salary?
We do, yes, ADP cuts our payroll checks.
Is this a work in progress, or are you done?
No, it's got to be a work in progress. I assure you, there is nothing that I consider us to underperform. The classic statement
What are
is,
you looking at next to change this?
well, I personally am focused on the pre-sales process, having been the person who left town without the pre-sales thing in the folder. The team is actually starting to do a lot more cross-functional pairing. So an HTA and a programmer go off to do observations together. Right? We are continuing to improve in the quality assurance realm. 2 interesting things is to make sure they're not testers. So that means, A, they need to continue to find automated tools for doing high-level strategic testing, as well as being involved in the early business analysis. So they go out and do observations, and they help the high-tech anthropologist, because quality assurance starts when you gather requirements, not by looking at the requirements and saying, oh, right? So they're trying to figure out fit for purpose, as opposed to fit for spec. But yes, we're full of challenges. I also come to these because then I also get to learn. Steal good ideas, that's what we do.
If the feedback process is where individuals get raises effectively, they're moving in their pay grades?
They get recommendations for raises, yes.
Okay, recommendations. So I was wondering about the team just sort of self-selecting everybody is going to like gas companies?
It's an interesting question. So let's imagine, right, because the team could conspire against us. They could all decide they all want a review, and they all vote for everybody to get a raise. Well, the interesting thing is that when we actually staff projects, we actually do look at the financial model to make sure that we're actually going to come out profitable. And if I have the most senior people, I mean, I think our top pay rate is somewhere, I don't know, $160,000 a year or something. Most people are nowhere near that, right? There are people down at the $8 an hour range, right, across those 15. If I had everybody at $160,000 a year, and I'm charging clients $85 an hour, I'm going to lose money. We can't do that. That means we'll use less of the senior talent and go find other people. They know the model. It's all open, right? I mean, it's not hidden. It's not. There's no office for the CEO. There's no office for me. We sit out with everybody else. The conversation for feedback is held in the room with everybody else. When somebody gets fired, it's held in the room with everybody else. It fits our culture. It's what we do. Nobody's surprised by it. We also don't make it a big deal.
What are the mores on personal phone calls and stuff like that?
When you get a personal phone call from the outside, so it simply depends upon the importance. So if you come into work and say, my sister-in-law is supposed to have a baby, I'd like to leave my email up, or I'd like to actually have my phone out, your partner's going to adjust to that. Now, if your partner is constantly going away, then we have to talk with your partner, and you have to talk with them that if you're off having personal phone calls, you can't get paid, and your partner can't get paid because they can't work. And we quickly sort that out. But do people take personal calls? Yes. Do they often have to train others to understand, I can't just do that? There's 80 people watching me while we have this call. I'm hoping it's important, honey. Right? We had one lady join us as a new hire out of college. She found out 2 weeks later her friends were all very upset with her. They're like, but you don't take our phone calls, you don't do our instant text messages, you ignore our emails all day long. And Keely's like, but I'm working. And they're like, so are we.
Maybe.
All right, if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to talk to you in the hallway. Thank you for coming, and I hope you found this valuable.